Hey everybody, Brian here. I know you're probably surprised, like, why are you putting this before the second classics week of the year? I want to get this over. I meant to do this earlier, now it's fucking late and I'm annoyed. I just want to get this done and over with. Also, my throat is killing me, so it's not art piece cancer though. Not today. I just want to let you guys know, first off, I hope you're having a happy holidays or happy, time off or whatever you celebrate or not celebrate, all that sort of stuff. Meant to say that in my list videos. Second thing is the major reason why I'm kind of talking to you guys now, which is a weird OCD thing about having certain things be the same one time and again and again and again. And these reviews, I kind of learn new editing tricks, as I always do, because I'm late and I'm lazy and I'm not as good as other people, most people rather. So you're going to notice that when it comes to like weird zoom-ins and fadeaways and cut-ins and all that, I actually found a way, to kind of do them properly. So it's not like my old classic reviews or the ones back from the summer when it was like the album covers kind of faded away to do a funny joke or a stupid cut-in. So I didn't do that this time around. It actually works. Everything works together, so you're going to clearly see that difference in video. So that's all I really want to say. I know it's stupid, but I just wanted to get it out there. So I hope you guys enjoy these videos and all the other stuff I said, and let's just get to the videos.
Oh, man, I'm just so excited to give you guys, these second week of classic reviews. It's such a cool thing, and oh, goodness. Oh, my Lord. Oh, my God. Oh, my God, it's snow! Oh my gosh, okay, let's go, come on, hurry. Yeah, boy, you see this fit, boy? Yeah, fur jacket, and all.
Oh my gosh.
Oh. No. That was a terrible idea. Shit. Fuck. Oh, man. I'm cold as fuck. Oh, okay. No, that was not a fucking good idea at all. No. Hey, guys. Thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. My name is Brian. Classics Week 2. But welcome to the debut of it, and this time we are going to be talking about the debut album of Bon Iver, For Emma, Forever Ago. Fucking look at that. I'm so artistic, I can even make my window look like the album cover. So deep. Bon Iver is the singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist project of that same sort of category, of Justin Vernon. Obviously, Bon Iver has gone on to do many interesting things, with his second album being a little bit more kind of ethereal and a little bit more spacey and a little bit more atmospheric in kind of what he was doing. But then obviously we got to something like 22 a Million, which is very experimental, very kind of, I don't know how to really explain that album. I love the record, but it's a lot going on. This time around, I wanted to go back to the inception of Bon Iver, mainly because I think this record is phenomenal, and I think it's one of the best debuts I've ever heard, and it's one of the best sort of modern indie folk projects I've heard as well. Now, the history of this record is kind of what you would expect. It's very much depressing and sad, and the backstory behind it is kind of the same. Obviously, Justin was going through a breakup at the time, as well as the breakup of a band of his, so he scurried away to Wisconsin to his father's cabin up in the snowy woods, and he sat there and recorded this album. And this album very much sounds isolated, but also kind of spacious at the same time at some moments. Now, there's going to be two things I'm going to repeat constantly during this review, which is the actual sound of the record and the lyrical content and what he's talking about. So to talk about the actual sound, it's very minimal. There's only really a couple tracks here that I don't even want to say a couple tracks, really like a track or two, and then a couple moments that actually have like anything else other than some like drums or guitar. And it's very much one sort of, not tone, because there is different tempos and all that sort of stuff and different moods to this record, but it very much is one kind of consistent flow throughout the whole record. And obviously the second thing are the lyrics. Justin as a songwriter on this record surprised the fuck out of me because it's the most vulnerable thing I've heard. One of the most vulnerable records I've listened to, coming from the debut of an artist and the debut album of said artist. It's kind of shocking and very bold to listen to a record like this and just feel like everything is laid out there. So one of the major points of contention for this is the intro track to this album, Flume, which has a lot of really interesting sort of themes about him and his mother, sort of him going back to her, him being her only love, and sort of him feeling completely isolated from the world and everybody around him. And also he has the garment line early on, which is sort of him kind of just letting everyone know to set the tone of the album, like, I'm going to be out here and just super vulnerable and telling you my story. Once again, I think a couple of the things I've already mentioned sort of go hand in hand on this song. The actual sound of it feels very kind of internalized. It's very much claustrophobic, I would say, but there's just some light guitars and it's a very slow, sombering song. But then we get to something like Lump Sum, which it's not really like an upbeat track either, but it has a little bit more of like a rhythmic guitar to it. I love sort of the cavernous vocals that open up the track as well. There's a little bit more spaciousness on the track. Obviously, the actual title of this track sort of coming from the idea of lump sum, which I like to internalize it because he mentions it on the song. He actually talks about lump sum, which is sort of this idea of sort of going through with this one shorthanded idea and to just sort of ignore his problems in a relationship and not necessarily using any other means to actually fix it. He uses it as a lump sum to just kind of be cool with it and move on. And also the end of this track kind of mirrors a lot of other sentiments too about the theme of this record, which is winter and going out of winter into spring. And the last track on here kind of mentions that. It has a really nice reference to the idea of, you know, waiting for the cold to be over and sort of feeling liberated by the end of it and waiting for spring to come, which is also mentioned on other tracks on here. The obvious first single from this album, which I still, like, I know it's such, like, an overdone song. Like, I understand, like, everybody covers it or everybody sort of talks about it, but Skinny Love is still an absolutely fabulous song. Just from, like, production, if there is any standpoint, I love the raw feel of it. It feels like Justin's just singing this song and everybody's just joining in. Even though it's not like an uplifting song, it's one of the more kind of upbeat, like attention-grabbing songs on this whole entire record. I love the metaphor of Skinny Love too, the idea of a male-nourished love, or something that, a love that doesn't have a lot of weight on it. I love a lot. I love sort of his fighting back and forth too. These wonderful, just heartbreaking lines about how he's trying to get his lover to end this relationship and like the whole thing of like, you know, cut the ropes and let me fall. But then like, I love how the song swings back around because as he's trying to force her to end it, he starts to feel a lot of regret too. And that again is sort of something that was very just, again, it's just listening to this song, it's just, God, Justin. But then we get to the Wolves, Act 1 and 2, which is probably one of the most eerie tracks on the record. It's one of the most minimal. It builds a lot towards the end. There's like crazy percussion that just violently comes in near the end too, but for the most part, it's probably the most, you know, sad and kind of somber song. But it's also the most direct. I love the storytelling on this. It's just absolutely beautiful and haunting. You know, there's a lot of really interesting messages on this record. I love sort of the lines that he talks about, solace my game, the star is you. Him sort of being trapped in this cabin but still thinking about her, and this kind of comes up a lot on this track, and sort of the mentions of maybe adultery that goes on later in the song with the whole Sinatra Blue Eyes line, which it's like when you look into kind of the whole meaning behind that, it just completely blows you away. Blindsided, a bit of a more mid-tempo song, a little bit going on with the guitars, again, just as most tracks on here, very minimal in what it's trying to do. I really like the call and response that he does later on in the track with himself, where like he sings kind of at a normal sort of falsetto and then he lifts it up for like the second part of the line. I thought that was really cool. This is yet another song that kind of mentions really depressing stuff like depression, you know, there's a pull to the flow. There's just a lot of the lines on here just give me that. The idea of being blindsided, which I take as sort of this idea of being blinded by the good and he's blindsided to it. So he kind of endures the pain and depression, and that's another big theme on this record, is him just sort of not wanting anything else in his peripheral. He's just focusing on his depression and his sadness. Creature Fear, which, you know, has very quiet verses first off, and it builds to these huge choruses. And this track, I think, is probably one of the most like relatable ones for me. I love this idea of him painting this picture of just a lot of different kinds of roads and how they're all, you know, as he says, they're fucked, relatively fucked. And that builds into the idea of anxiety and fear, and sort of him just saying, look, like, he doesn't know where we're gonna go, and there's so many different paths. And then the second half of the song, like near the end, sort of starts bringing up these really just, at least to me, relating to me, emotional ideas of just like two people being in two different places and then coming back together, and their stories for each, and they both like affect each other still, because that's just what a relationship is, and sort of they don't know each other as the people they were, and sort of how it ends with him feeling like, was my plan fucked all along? And it's like, God, like, it's like, it's one of those concepts that's very simple, but like in execution and in sort of wording and in just storytelling, he just makes it work so well as a brand new thing. And he's, again, just his bluntness and his honesty is what pulls you in. This track wonderfully transitions into the 2-minute instrumental theme, which then lovely gets into For Emma, which I love sort of the dialogue-y conversation of the song. I love it so much. This is probably the most full-sounding song of everything. There's some added horns on here, even though I think they add very nicely to the song. It kind of reminds me a bit of Skinny Love, with getting you kind of up, and it's like, oh, okay, because the rest of the record, it's not like it's sleepy, but it's obviously very somber and kind of low-key, and it's just sort of simmers, where this track, I think, brings it back up. But then the final song, Restacks, which I feel like I can go into for a long time, but I really don't want to, only because I feel like it's one of those things where it's just you listening to it yourself and just sort of you digging into it. But basically, well, first off, it goes straight back into sort of this really sad, just solemn guitar. It's a little bit different to me than something like Flume or The Wolves, which I think, even though the guitar's a little bit more upbeat here, I'm not trying to say the song's necessarily happy, but it has sort of this different kind of tone than most of the songs on the record. Pretty much, he uses sort of the metaphor of Qumran, which I guess when you do your research is when they found the Dead Sea Scrolls, which had this huge impact on Christianity, and, you know, people didn't want to accept it, or people wanted to accept it, and, you know, Justin went on to talk about how this was just sort of his way of having a metaphor of shit changing and sort of going forward and how it affects you. And then he also uses sort of the idea of, like, I'm assuming is poker chips, kind of him dealing them, or, you know, putting them down on a table of love and emotion, like that being the metaphor, and that's sort of another part that is brought up. And then just early on in the track, him sort of having these self-doubts that maybe many of us have, where he thought he went into a relationship knowing this was his love, and then he moved on. And then sort of this same situation's kind of happening again, and him sort of falling into that same pattern, and him doubting himself in the past, because it becomes sort of a cycle of him like, well, I thought of this before, I thought of this huge love before, and I thought this was it, but like, what is this supposed to be now? And he starts having self-doubts, which is, again, just such a relatable feeling, and just the way he paints it is so beautiful. The line, like, all my love is down in a frozen ground, is also a great sort of metaphor of him just being sunken and dead and feeling dead, but also the idea of, once again, like, maybe it'll melt going into the spring, and maybe his love is dead for the moment, maybe it'll come. And then the whole crow thing that happens in this, where it's like depression's there, just lingering with him, and it gives him slight hope with the whole, you know, the rattling keys line, and it's like, fuck! Like, this album is just so wonderful, but it's also so sad. And like I said, I think this is such a just bold way to debut your career. And I don't necessarily want to say, like, he hasn't done that later down in his career. Like, I definitely feel like Justin has done very interesting things. But in terms of just lyrics, and in terms of just putting everything on the line and just musically, yes, it's very simple, but what he does on this record is effective, and I think lyrically and sonically, everything about this record is absolutely beautiful. and it's one of, like I said, the best debuts I've ever heard, and I think it's one of the best examples of modern indie folk I've ever heard. But if you guys listen to this record, what do you guys think of it? Leave that in the comments below. Please, if you haven't listened to it, check it out. Obviously, if you haven't already, please subscribe. I have sort of all my old videos posted back up, which I used to do old reviews and all that, and also sort of my 1.5 phase as well. I'm going to be continuing the rest of these classic reviews throughout the week. I'm very excited to be back giving you guys classic reviews. Blah, blah, blah. Trying to not stumble over my words, but other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and thank you for tuning in to ChannelBK. Peace out, guys.